I'm James Johnson, and you're watching Niagara Pro Tips. Today we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about history roll-ups. So taking fairly granular data, say 15-minute interval history, and looking at that information, aggregating it, rolling it up into less frequent records, so maybe daily records or monthly records and that sort of thing. There's a number of ways we can go about rolling up data in Niagara 4. I'll start off by just talking about the BQL history rollup functions, and probably the easiest way to look at some of that is actually to use the legacy AX history chart builder view. And when you go into the history chart builder view, you can select a history. In this case, the main KW I already selected previously, so it just populated into there, but I could have picked it from the chart list here. And you can select the type of chart that you want to build. And then we can pick a time range. So maybe I'll look at last week. And then the roll-up function here is what we can select. So none is by default, but we can pick from these other roll-up intervals. So for example, if I wanted to look at a daily average of my KW readings, then I could use this. And I'll build the chart, and we'll see that this is a legacy style chart, but it creates a bar chart with an average KW for each day of the last week. Now, I still really can't see the BQL query at this point in time, but if I click the Save button here, this will allow me to save this chart as an actual PX file with a chart in it. So if we take a look at the PX view here, there's a chart pane, and in the chart pane there's a bar chart. And when we look at the binding for the chart binding here, we'll see this is the BQL query with the history rollup function. So it's querying the history, the main KW history, for a period of last week, and then it's using BQL with the history rollup function. And the way you call that is the history module colon, then history rollup is the class, then a dot rollup is the function that we want to call. And there's a couple different things we can give as a parameter. What it defaults to is using an enum essentially. So it's the history module, a rollup interval enum, and we're giving it the daily tag value, essentially saying we want to roll up to those daily records. Now, I'll show you another PX view here, and this PX view has a bound table embedded into it. And I'll show you in the PX editor here. This is just a bound table, and it has a table binding on it, and it's using the exact same BQL query that I was showing you in the PX with the chart itself that I built from the chart builder. And what's worth noting here is that the results of that bound BQL query actually has a different schema to it than you might expect. So there's a timestamp column, an end timestamp, a count, a min, max, average, and sum. So the history rollup function gives us these aggregate values, all these standard aggregate functions and values whenever that query is resolved. And I put a little table here below just to emphasize what that history schema is. And it's typically all camel case, so like end timestamp, that's a display. This is the actual schema name. It's a lowercase n with a capital T for timestamp. And the count, min, max, average, sum are all lowercase as well as timestamp. And you can see the types of each of those cells that are returned in the schema. They're abs time, integer, or doubles. Now, what's important to understand maybe about that schema is those names of the schema here. So if I go back to my chart, for example, and I look at the bar chart, I can add more table chart bindings here. So we go and select the chart, table chart binding, and I can just copy this BQL query, and I'll paste that into the ORD here. And I might want to give this one a series name. I think we did average, right? Yep. So we'll do average as the series name. And then maybe this one we'll choose min. And I'll give it a brush color. Now, the key here is specifying the X column and the Y column. And you can see up here that it's already, the X column is a table column, and it's reading the timestamp from the schema. and the Y column is from the table column, and it's reading the average schema. So I can copy this, and then I'll just actually paste it here on the X column. And maybe for the Y column, I'll just click on it, and you'll notice the choice is row index or table column. So I'll pick table column, and then type in one of the other schema names from that result set. And you can see now that on this legacy chart, I'm showing the min with the red bars and the average with the blue bars. So it's using that BQL query with the history rollup function, which is returning a table essentially with this schema, and then the chart binding is extracting a specific column out of the schema and plotting the values on the chart. And when you look at the syntax for the BQL history rollup, I sort of pasted here an image of the enum values. So we're using the tag values in that syntax, and I use daily, which is ordinal number 6 here, but these are the other ordinal tags which you can use in that syntax for the rollup interval. Now there's also another syntax that you can use, which instead of specifying the enum, you're going to give it a relative time value. So this happens to be the number of seconds in one day. So that would be similar to a daily rollup. I could use the Baja :rel time, and then in single quotes the number of milliseconds that I want to have in that rollup interval. Now there's disadvantages to that maybe, and that is when I'm looking at certain periods, like say for example daily. How many days are there in a month, or how many hours are there in a day, right? With daylight savings times, different days, number of days in a month. So if you're looking at monthly rollups, or if you're looking at yearly rollups where you have leap years and different numbers of days and such in the year, then it's better to use these tag values because they account for it. But if you're looking at other defined periods of time, you can use that rel time period. Also at the bottom, just giving you little pointers here maybe as far as limiting the time range of the data that you're looking at. The period, the question mark period equals, and there's a function name here essentially, that's pulling out these different time ranges that you can use. So there's different floating time periods that are supported with that period syntax. And you can also specify a fixed time range by specifying the start time and the end time. And those use the format here, which is a 4-digit year dash 2-digit month dash 2-digit day, capital T, 2-digit hour, 2-digit minute, 2-digit second, milliseconds, and then the time zone offset. And you can see what that query might look like here in this text box as well. So these are all different syntaxes and ways that we can utilize BQL, all using the history rollup function to give us either a table of data or a chart, maybe using the legacy charts. Now, there's several other ways that we can look at rolled up data. Another way is looking at the web chart, and this is just a standard web chart. I'm looking at that same main KW history, and you can see that I'm looking at today. It's giving me all the individual 15-minute records. Depending on what size data set I look at, the web chart may apply some rollup and aggregate functions automatically. So if I look at last month, for example, you can see at the bottom, it's actually rolling up to 30-minute records because of the number of records that are returned in a month of data. Or if I look at last year, then you'll see at the bottom, it's rolling up the data to a one-day rollup actually. So it's actually aggregating and averaging some of those values. So you can see after refreshing the chart, now I'm back to showing all the records, I can click the gear icon in the corner and choose the sampling tab. And it does auto sampling. We can tell it to use sampling, and you can select what type of aggregate function you want to apply, like average, min, max, or sum. And then we can also pick from some of these default time ranges, or I could pick custom perhaps and put in a time range, like say maybe I want to look at 3-hour averages. Now you'll see that there's fewer data points here corresponding to one record every 3 hours. It might be a little bit more apparent if we shifted to a bar chart. You can see at the bottom here it's showing 3 hours. Now even without switching to a custom range, just going to a bar chart style, because it's less room basically to display data, will result in some roll-up aggregation happening. So where the line chart is not aggregating the 96 records, the bar chart does aggregate to 30-minute records automatically when looking at today. Or if I look at last month, for example, you can see that it's automatically gone to daily roll-up. So the bar chart style has a little bit more aggressive maybe roll-up functions than the line chart, because the line can represent all the data points more easily and clearly. So we'll go ahead and pause there, and we're going to make this a two-part video just to keep the length of the video a little bit shorter, and we'll come back in the second part and show about using series transforms and analytics to also do roll-up functions. So thanks for watching the video, and stay tuned to part 2.